Hello, I am Ajit Kumar Jha, CEO of Power Pixar channel. And today, in the public global program, we are going to focus on the fierce anti incumbency that we witnessed in the year 2024, which is last year basically. And let's start with Mark Zuckerberg, the Meta CEO. Mark Zuckerberg, in a recent interview with podcaster Joe Rogan, he made this point. Mark Zuckerberg was discussing the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on global politics, and he suggested that the pandemic caused a loss of trust in government across the world, from Africa to Asia to Europe to Americas, all over the world, he said, regardless of ideology, whether the incumbent was a left government or the right government, they all lost elections. And that is something very interesting. Why did it happen? But before we go further in explaining why this fierce anti incumbency against governments all over, let's start with the latest controversy. And the controversy was created by our Union Railway Minister and the Minister for Information and Broadcasting, Electronics and Information Technology, Mr. Ashwini Vaishnav. Because what was the controversy? When Mark Zuckerberg made the remark, he said incumbents across the entire world lost elections and challengers came to power. Well, he actually didn't point out challengers came to power. He stuck with the fact that incumbents lost elections. And in that, he also included India. And Ashwini Vaishnav jumped up. Modi ji has not lost. Modi ji is still in power. In 2024, Mr. Modi Narendra Modi has won consecutively third time. And therefore, the entire controversy began. In fact, Ashwini Vaishnav claimed that he did a fact check on Mark Zuckerberg. And let me read out to you exactly what Ashwini Vaishnav said. As the world's largest democracy, India conducted the 2024 elections with over 640 million voters. People of India reaffirmed their trust, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji's leadership. Mr. Zuckerberg's claim that most incumbent governments, including India, in 2024 elections lost post-COVID is factually incorrect. From free food for 800 million, 2.2 billion free vaccines, and aid to nations worldwide during COVID, to leading India as the fastest growing major economy, Prime Minister Modi's decisive third term victory is a testament to good governance and public trust. And then he pointed out that Meta, it's disappointing to see, is creating misinformation from Mr. Zuckerberg himself. Let's uphold facts and credibility. Now, suddenly, many people in the Indian media began defending Mr. Vaishnav, and generally there was silence on the other side. But let's look at what Zuckerberg said in general, what happened across the world, before we come to a resolution of whether Zuckerberg was correct or Mr. Vaishnav was correct. What exactly happened? 3 governments in Africa, South Africa, the elections were held in June, and the African National Congress, which had been ruling South Africa since the end of apartheid, lost its majority after 30 years, 3 decades in power, sweeping loss for the African National Congress. Now, has it lost power? No. Just like India, ANC has also formed a coalition government. So, in a way, there is a parallel here. South Africa and in India, the BJP lost power, but came in coalition in the NDA, and Mr. Modi again became the prime minister. So there is a parallel here. So both of these cases, of course, the incumbent had reduced its vast majority, but somehow ended up in power through a coalition government. Number two, Botswana, after 60 years, lost in a major dramatic defeat. A similar thing happened, for example, in Senegal. President Macky Sall was decisively defeated. He was trying to postpone the presidential election, and then he lost. So immediately three governments lost in Africa, significant elections in Africa. Then, of course, India is an example. It is controversy, as we pointed out in the beginning of this podcast. Then let's move to Europe. The Conservative Party had been in power in Britain for 14 years. They almost had half a dozen prime ministers in those 14 years, but they lost power, and it was the worst loss since the year 1832. In a landslide, Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, came to power. So this was a major loss of incumbency in England. Again, French Prime Minister Michel Barnier lost in a no confidence motion. And by the way, this was the first no confidence motion loss ever since the year 1962. Now, go back to Germany. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz lost a vote of no confidence, paving the way for another elections. So we see England, France, Germany, three important European countries. We saw three African countries, three important European countries. Then Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau resigned. You saw the entire drama that took place, because just before he resigned, his finance minister and deputy prime minister had resigned, pointing out that Justin Trudeau had lost the moral trust. Go back to the US. We saw that Donald Trump won the election. The incumbent Kamala Harris, in this case Joe Biden, but Kamala Harris was the vice president. The Democratic Party lost. And by the way, in the US, the last three presidential elections, incumbents have lost. If you remember, Democratic Party lost when Mr. Trump earlier became the president. Then Mr. Trump lost to Mr. Biden. And then this time, Kamala Harris lost, Democratic Party lost again to Trump. So three incumbents lost consecutively. Then go to Japan. In Asia, for example, in South Korea, in both the countries, in Japan as well as in South Korea, the incumbent lost. In fact, in Japan, the elections were held in September, and Japanese Prime Minister Ishiba Shigeru, the Liberal Party the Liberal Democratic Party, lost its majority since the year 2009. Another massive loss of the incumbent. Then I pointed out already the case of South Korea. Then let's take two other governments. Very, very important. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad was forced to flee from Syria to Russia. It was a revolution in a way, not only a mere loss of government in an election. And the same thing happened in our neighboring Bangladesh. We saw the way the, the president was almost thrown out, and there was a protest movement by the students, and later the Islamists joined it, and the entire thing looked like another revolution. Some people think it was an imposition by outside forces. Hasina is forced to move from Bangladesh to India. In fact, India has basically protected her. Now, why am I counting all this? I am pointing out what is happening. Why are incumbents all across the world in 2024 losing one election after another? What is there a common factor there? And lots of analysts have started working on this. And two most important reasons across these elections that analysts have pointed out are because of COVID pandemic, it resulted in a serious economic crisis. We see that in our own country. We see that Indian growth rates is sliding of late. In fact, the last 2 quarters growth rates in India has really come down. We see our stock markets plummeting. We see that in inflation going very high, unemployment becoming very high. We see that in all kinds of other measures, and this rising unemployment, inflation, cuts in social spending due to the economic crisis is common to all these countries that I have pointed out. In fact, in the United Kingdoms, the new Prime Minister, the Labour Prime Minister Keir Starmer, he visited a place called Grimsby in northeastern England, and he asked residents, he wanted to know what is happening. Why are people so fiercely anti-incumbent? He asked people to describe the government in one word. And let me give you almost about 10 words that people use to describe a government. Number one, irrelevant. In fact, number one should be a joke. People said government is a joke. People are so angry. Number two, irrelevant. Number three, authoritarian. Number four, elitist. Number five, distant, far away from people's needs. Number six, inaccessible. People cannot meet the bureaucrats and the ministers. Number seven, self-serving, only serves its own interest. Governments serve the interests of the ministers, the bureaucrats, not of the people. Unambitious, untrustworthy, finally. All these words were used by people across to describe a government. And it's the same feeling in India. It's the same feeling in the rest of the world. That is why Zuckerberg had raised this entire debate. And of course, it's a fallout of, I would argue, it's a fallout of two things. The 2007 2008 global crisis in capitalism didn't quite end. It was restored back by lots of packages that the American economy did by simply printing a lot of dollars and sort of restored it partly. But I think the crisis continued, and then came the pandemic. And that has created a massive economic crisis in capitalism, about which we can discuss in another video, which is reflected in all the countries. And that is leading to governments losing focus. Governments are not focusing on economic growth and citizens' empowerment. And the other factor some analysts point out is important, why governments are losing all the time, is because of the spread of the internet, the social media increased internet access erodes trust in government because ordinary citizens talk about their problems in social media, but governments do not respond. Governments are not using social media to restore confidence in the people. In fact, the other thing that the social media has done is brought about political polarization. People come out with their anger on both sides, and you saw that in the US, we saw that in India. But let me wrap up by pointing out what Zuckerberg said is a deep problem. Zuckerberg is not alone. A lot of analysts have started analyzing this fierce anti-incumbency all across the world. Mr. Ashwini Vaishnav, of course, caught on and with a sort of what one would call aggressive nationalism attacked Zuckerberg. But the truth is that even in India, the BJP lost its majority that it got, absolute majority in 2014 and 2019. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the kind of popularity he had across the country was greatly eroded, as we saw in 2024 Lok Sabha elections. The BJP did manage to win a couple of assembly elections in Haryana and Maharashtra, but in general, people are angry all across the world. Thank you very much. Please do subscribe to our channel, and we'll make such more interesting video podcasts in the future. Thank you once again.